There are some weighty issues out there, and we know nobody better to go to than the man himself, Jesse Washington from the Undefeated, senior writer, author, man of many talents, including shots on the basketball court. Jesse, how you doing today, man?
I'm good, man. It's great to be here with you guys.
I don't know if you're surviving your basketball times, but we're going to use your brain a little bit here and try and ask you about some of the stuff that's going on in the world. These past weeks have been kind of crazy in sports, lots of different stories that touch on race and culture and society. And so we really thought that you'd be somebody to talk to. A few weeks ago, we saw the leak of emails that were released with Jon Gruden going back to 2011 that were discovered during the Washington football team investigation. Homophobic comments, racist comments, sexist comments, you name it. They're kind of included in there. Before we go further with it, I'm wondering what your reaction was when they came out and how it was handled with him being able to resign and coach his last game.
Hmm. Well, I was disgusted, and I always sort of felt some sort of way that that Super Bowl that he won in Tampa was really Tony Dungy's team. So that came to mind. But I mean, the comments, I was like, man, he's got to go like immediately. And so, sometimes they let people go gracefully, sometimes they go in disgrace. And apparently he had built up enough, leverage, capital, goodwill, undeserved, I might add, that his exit was somewhat more graceful than it probably should have been. But everything done in the dark will come to light. That's what my mom always told me, and I'm really glad that this came out. I think that his comments, he definitely deserved to be immediately gotten rid of, and he should never work in the NFL again. Um, for what it's worth, because he's already rich and famous and everything, he can do whatever he wants. But I was just disgusted, and I thought that, um, my colleague at the Undefeated, the great columnist Bill Roden, who knows far more about the NFL than I do, had a terrific, terrific column. I urge everybody to go read it. And it said, okay, yeah, this is horrible, but let's think about the culture that just allowed him to do this for years and probably decades, and was just like, oh, haha, coach. Yeah, wink, wink. Oh, good one. Yeah, LOL. What about this culture that enabled him? Who are all the other people who participated in this? Where their emails at? Who are the ones who encouraged him? He worked at ESPN, which is my employer. So this was probably not unknown to the people he worked with at ESPN. Why did nobody step up before? That, as the great Bill Roden pointed out, is the bigger question that needs to be answered right now.
See, what frustrated me, Jesse, wasn't even just that it happened before, it happened last week or 2 weeks ago. Because after the first comments came out about DeMaurice Smith, he wasn't fired after that. He wasn't suspended after that. They waited, and the reaction by Mark Davis was basically to do nothing other than to say that's not the Raider way. And only after the Raiders did nothing and more came out through the New York Times were they forced into the position of removing him. So you can be disgusted about what's happened over the history of all this in the last decade and beyond that with other coaches and people. But as recently as 2 weeks ago, it was still going on. There was still the wink, wink, nod, nod. It's okay. So
Absolutely. Yeah. So what? And that is the way of the NFL. That's the way of American society in general. Al Davis was seeing which way the wind. I'm sorry, the Davises were seeing which way the wind was blowing. You know, oh, maybe this might blow over. Maybe someone else might say something and detract attention from this. Um, let's. Is it really going to be outrageous? And they always need the smoking gun. I mean, look at what happened with Ray Rice. They knew exactly what Ray Rice did, but when the video came out of him punching his wife unconscious in the elevator, oh, now it's a big deal. And so, too much of the time, we operate on public perception rather than what is right and what is wrong. So, the Raiders were trying to minimize their losses, but it was not to be. So, I do think that that is very discouraging. But, I'm not surprised.
You mentioned the emails and DeMaurice Smith, the head of the NFL union, has raised concerns about what else could be contained. This came to light because of the Washington football team investigation. There's over 600,000 emails. This didn't start over Jon Gruden. And so I'm curious, Jeff and I have discussed one, the NFL is the arbiter of what becomes public here. That seems a little a little bit concerning to me. But two, the merits of what should be released. DeMaurice Smith has sort of insinuated there may be conversations about minority hiring. There's been talk about whether Colin Kaepernick is discussed in there. Eric Reid, we know, was discussed in there. What are your thoughts on what should be made public and how this process should occur so that we can come up with a solution and not just salacious headlines?
Yeah, everything. That's the short answer. Give the whole trove to a reputable third party. Someone who comes to mind just off top of is a person who was a prominent figure in the NFL for quite some time, and now has sort of receded from view. But the attorney David Cornwell. David Cornwell has represented a lot of players who got in trouble and got a lot of players out of big time trouble. Ben Roethlisberger, for one, Ryan Braun, et cetera, et cetera. But David Cornwell also is a proud and principled black man who has the trust of the league and also is, in my opinion, someone who could be trusted to put out there what needs to be out there. And so, if not him, find a reputable and trusted third party, give all the emails to that person. The NFL cannot adjudicate its own case. I mean, we know that their MO is to hide and deflect and delay. So get them out of the NFL's hands into a third party's hands, review everything, and then, let's see what was done in the dark.
That answer makes me feel so good because my concern, Jason and I discussed this last week, is that if you just hand it over to the media, it can get into some of the wrong hands where people are just looking for headlines. And that seems to be what you just suggested is the most reasonable thing you can possibly suggest is finding somebody like that. David Cornwell, to me, I mean, what you're suggesting seems great. Another person to me, if you want, is somebody like Tony Dungy. It
Yeah,
is to get somebody who is respected on both sides of the table to sit down and review them. If it's going to be a group, it could be a panel as well, if that's what you want to do. But have somebody or a group of somebody sit down and go through them that everybody trusts, as opposed to this turning into let's see how many sexy Twitter stories we can put out in the course of a week or a month. That's not going to help advance the dialogue.
right. And that's a great point. And, as a proud car carrying member of the media, I absolutely don't think that it's just a good idea to give it all to us. However, they're all going after it right now. And the whole trove is just probably about four keystrokes away from being sent to somebody at some point. So if the NFL was smart, they would get ahead of it. Get ahead of it. Work with somebody trustworthy. Be ready to take your medicine. Be ready to properly punish the transgressions that are absolutely going to be found in there. But no, to have it just be a tweet fest, I think would be the wrong move. That's a great point, Jeff.
We wanted to shift gears a little bit. Talk we had last week, filmmaker David McMahon on one of the three filmmakers for the PBS Muhammad Ali documentary. You obviously are very familiar with that whole process there. Can you talk to us about Ali and what you thought about what seemed like to us a more complete telling of the story of his life in the context of the times?
Yeah, yeah. I thought the documentary was great, and it so much of what Ken Burns does is establish a historical record in a very accurate and compelling and entertaining way. And Ali was nothing if not entertaining. And so I like the fact that I'm a word guy, man, and I do love films and documentaries. I've been fortunate. The Undefeated has given me a little bit of latitude to dip a toe in those waters. Um, and so but I'm still a word guy, man. I'm still in love with the written word. You got to dance with the girl, who brought you to the party. And so I really like the fact that that documentary relied a lot on Jonathan Ive's biography of Ali, and he's featured in the documentary as well. So, Ali, we needed that reminder of who he was and the principles on which he stood and why he did the things he did and how much he sacrificed in order to try to help Black people and America in general. and how much of a goodwill peace ambassador he became, a Muslim, mind you, in the 60s and the 70s, was embraced because his heart was so good. The doc does a great job of talking about his flaws, and he had many. And it doesn't shy away from those things, which is what history is all about. And I think that our country could learn from that in terms of accepting the reality of things and then deal with it. So, congratulations to the team that put it together and to PBS. I highly recommend that people of all ages watch the doc, because it's a pretty significant achievement and a landmark in terms of public figures who changed America, not just sports, but changed America.
I watched that documentary, and I've always been an admirer and fascinated by both the positive and the negative of some of the things that came out of his life. But I keep thinking about it in the lens of now and wondering, could Muhammad Ali have been Muhammad Ali in today's world with today's media? Or would Muhammad Ali have been canceled at times for some of the things he said about his opponents? Would Muhammad Ali have turned into Muhammad Ali if you had your guess, based on what our culture is now and what our media landscape is like at the moment?
Hmm. That's a fascinating question. I think he absolutely would have been Ali, but he just would have adjusted. He would have, he would have read his opponent and responded accordingly. So I don't think he would have said the same things that he would have said, but because he also would have been a product of this time. But I think he still would have had that mouth. I think he still would have been. You would never have been able to shut him up, and he still would have been able to do what he did in the ring. And so, yeah, some of the things he said were horrible and cruel and unnecessary. And as a person who believes in God, I do not find it accidental that the weapon that he used to hurt so many people, which was his tongue, was taken away from him. So, I do think there's that, but I don't think that the times would have changed Ali. I think he would have had about a gazillion followers on social media, and he would have, he was ahead of his time in terms of athletes standing up for their rights in a very strong way. Didn't someone recently compare Kyrie Irving to Ali?
I think that comparison's a little bit off there, Jesse.
Oh man, just a little. I mean, we need the real deal here.
Just a
I
bit
mean,
wide.
just a bit. So no, I think he still would have been. It would have been, would he have been a black Muslim? Would he have been, down with, the Nation of Islam today? The Nation of Islam is a changed institution from when he gathered it. When he belonged to it. So,
I
but
love to
I do.
talk on his Twitter feed.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Can you imagine? I mean, because this dude, he was you could not shut this man up. Like, we've all competed against somebody like that, no matter what. Even if they lose, they'd be like, I'm still better. Like, you can't shut them up. And they can, so I just think that it would have been amazing to see him. I think his voice would have been even more magnified. But great question, Jeff. I got a question for you guys. What was the part of the documentary that surprised you? Was there stuff in there you were like, wow, I really didn't know that about Ali?
I knew a lot about Ali. The thing that surprised me most was actually towards the beginning of it, when they were talking about how this group of businessmen basically got together to keep him away from the mob. That's of the things that I saw in there that surprised me most. That was one of the ones that surprised me most.
The thing that surprised me, look, I heard the trash talk in public. I never heard the trash talk in the ring. And so the way that they took the sound down and there wasn't commentary and you could hear him talking and you could hear the fans and the reaction, that was, it made it so much more real to me. Like, you heard about the greatness of Ali and you heard about the reaction the fans would have, both positive and negative, but you could hear it for yourself there. To me, that was really cool.
Yeah, that was great filmmaking. To that point, when the dude wouldn't call him by his chosen name and insisted on calling him Clay, and he was just pulverize him saying, "What's my name? What's my name?" Like that was rather
Yeah,
incredible.
like hearing it as he's like taking the man down, he's still talking to him on the way. It was just unbelievable. You talk about the written word. So I'm gonna take you back to another book. We had Keyshawn Johnson and Bob Glauber on a few weeks ago talking about their book, The Forgotten First. Kenny Washington, Woody Strode, Marion Motley, and Bill Willis and the Breaking of the NFL Color Barrier. We talked to them. One of them was Jackie Robinson's college teammate. Everybody knows Jackie Robinson. There's Jackie Robinson Day. His number is retired. People know of him. Nobody knows the story of these first four. What has to change as the NFL reaches another milestone anniversary so that we tell the story of the NFL and other sports and the breaking of their color barriers so that people get the recognition they deserve?
Hmm. Wow. See, this is why I rock with you guys, because you come up with these things that I haven't thought about before, these questions that need to be asked that other people are not thinking of. So I've never thought about that. What has to change? Why do we not remember these four like we do Jackie Robinson? I think part of it is because after they played, there was this period where they, I guess resegregated the league. What would you call it? They didn't have any black players in the NFL for quite some time after that,
So it was
and
before. The fascinating thing was it was before that was when they segregated, and they broke it after. And when Jeff and I interviewed Keyshawn and Bob, our question was sort of, do you think the NFL doesn't want to celebrate being pulled along to this?
mm,
Like they didn't go there voluntarily. They were sort of forced to. The Cleveland Rams moved to LA and had to go before a public tax board. And when they did it, a reporter asked the then general manager a question about, are you still going to have no people of color on your team? And the next year, Kenny Washington and Woody Strode were brought on to the Rams. And so, the course of history with the NFL, it just it shocks me that the baseball celebrates Jackie. We have a day. We take time out. We tell his story and what happened and embrace that history. And the NFL doesn't seem to do that.
yeah, I think part of it, the reason why Jackie is elevated is because his talent was so transcendent, and certainly these players were extremely talented, but not to the level of Jackie. Same with the NBA a little bit. The NBA does celebrate it, but those first guys were not, the among the all-time greats in league history as Jackie Robinson was. It's interesting because when I did the book with Coach Thompson, he kept telling me about all the guys who were way like super duper duper stars of black basketball that never got a chance to play in the NBA. And all the people, oh yeah, Bill Russell was great, and he was, and Casey Jones and all these guys. He was like, man, there were tons of people better than them, And I was like, wait a minute, coach, like better than them, better than Jordan? And he said, hey, we'll never know. So John Thompson believes that there was probably people as good as Michael Jordan and Bill Russell who didn't get to play in the NBA. That's a little bit of a side note. More to your point, Jackie's talent was part of what elevated him. And then it's like a made for TV story. And I think you guys are perfectly right. I love the point you're making. The NFL was dragged into it. They had to do it. Branch Rickey took the initiative for a number of reasons, among them financial, you
Mhm.
know. And so, and also Jackie Robinson was such like this man of character, and everything he did after baseball, and also baseball held at that time. I think baseball held this place in American culture and the popular imagination that it doesn't hold anymore. But it was this singular focus of the country that allowed Jackie's not myth, facts, history, factual history, to be built into what it was. But the NFL should do right by it. So what has to happen is, and the climate is right for it now. I mean, hey, racial justice is in style now, right? Everybody wants to, Black Lives Matter, which is another thing that the NFL was dragged into.
Yeah,
Maybe now they will
but here's a
finally do
chance.
it.
But here's a chance they don't have to be dragged into it now. Even if they were dragged into it before, you're now celebrating the 75th year, or no, I forget what year they're
Yeah.
celebrating. But they have a chance to do this. And by the way, before I forget, it sounds like you have your next book lined up. which is you say that you talk to John and that there are all these players that people don't know about. There's a book to write, and
Yeah, that's a
it
good
doesn't
point.
have to be that. Just like Keyshawn's book and Bob Glauber's book, it doesn't have to be that these people are lost to history.
Right.
We
But
all
you know
need
what
to.
though? You're right. And I'm sorry to interrupt, but before I forget. So they don't, now is the perfect time for them to do it. This connects back to what we're talking about how they're handling this Jon Gruden thing and the environment. When you have an organization that's not diverse, that doesn't include the voices of people of color, that doesn't have women, that all has this, monochromatic, older mindset, and is you miss these things. You miss these things, and I don't think that the NFL hierarchy and leadership, and particularly, I mean, it's a owner-driven league, and you know they dropped the ball, they fumbled, and evidently there's nobody within that structure that says, hey, this is something that needs to be done. So you know I'm sort of glad that they missed it. They don't deserve to do it now. Like, and part of everything that's going on in this whole the pendulum swinging back and black people getting all this stuff, first black this, first black that, still, like it sort of irks me. Like, oh really, now George Floyd had to die for this to happen? The whole country had to burn. So the fact that the NFL has missed the boat on it, if they catch up, fine, but if they don't, then that'll show that organization for what it truly is.
Yeah, and you're right, but I just because the elephant in the room is the NFL and whether they do right. The NFL shouldn't be celebrating themselves for being dragged into it. They should be celebrating these individuals for the brave things they did. We had Mel Renfro on a couple weeks ago, and Mel Renfro was one of the leaders in dealing with segregated housing for players.
Mm,
That the African American players would go to one area of town, and the white players would go to a different area of town.
mm.
And he was one of the people that kind of started that effort to stop it. And it's those kind of individuals that deserve to be celebrated for what they did, and the NFL should celebrate them. They shouldn't celebrate the shield and what the shield represents. They should be celebrating the individuals that made the shield what it should be and what it should aspire to be going forward.
Man, 100%. But and yes, love you guys. Love the way you guys think about these things. How many NFL owners are willing to excavate that history? Or how many NFL owners are among those in our country who say, oh, stop dwelling on the past? You
I would
know,
guess a lot of them are really concerned about what's in their own organization emails right now, frankly.
there
I
you
mean,
go.
if I'm being real, like let's be honest, there are conversations. If you're putting it in email, you're having the conversation in a boardroom someplace, or in a back room, or in an elevator. Like you're not just using those terms because you decided to write an email to somebody. There's a pervasive feeling among some people that has to be dealt with, and I hope it's an eye opener to everybody. That look. I used to work with political candidates, and I used to tell them everything you say and do is subject to a Google search. So, like, people need to understand
And
that
they don't listen either.
no, they don't listen either. But it's not just about putting it in writing at this point. It's about changing the thought process and stopping those things from occurring. And I don't know, I don't have a larger answer, but I hope that the sunlight that you talk about is the best disinfectant to this to try and move forward. I just worry that they're going to try and sweep it under the rug. I did want to ask you. I know I don't want to go too long with you because we value your time. I know you have a take on Ben Simmons that we want to get to. I'll let Jeff ask that, but I wanted to ask you real fast. At the Undefeated, you guys have done a ton of work about HBCUs, and I didn't want to not talk about that. You've got a story about Chris Paul's docuseries, Why Not Us? Hugh Jackson's impact at Tennessee State, Deion Sanders at Jackson State, what players are doing to turn their lives around at FAMU. Can you talk about the importance of HBCUs and the role they're playing right now in giving people the opportunity through athletics and culture right now?
Yeah, man. Thank you for asking, because I'm so proud of the Undefeated and the editor who supervises that coverage, my man X, John X Miller. Um, you know, HBCUs are in many ways the backbone of Black America and have played an unheralded but indispensable role in uplifting Black folks. The majority of professional Black people in a number of disciplines graduated from HBCUs. And so, and then sports, obviously, we all know about, historically speaking, the tremendous talent that came to the pros from HBCUs before integration and all that talent was stolen. So it's pretty sad now that they don't have enough resources to collect the best talent. But at the Undefeated, we're continuing to shine a light on what they're doing for the Black community. And let's not forget, we all look at football as the path to, the NFL, as if that's the only thing, but really, it's about giving kids. There are thousands and thousands of kids, young people, playing football who are never going to the NFL, not thinking about it, but it's a part of their life and their experience, and it adds character to their development. So the HBCUs continue to do that for so many people. So I just love the fact that we're highlighting those things. And then, hey man, they can ball too. They can ball and they have some talent, and they're getting more attention, which will lead to more talent. And so what Deion Sanders is doing at Jackson State, and where he goes, cameras follow. And Chris Paul's situation is really interesting because if you listen to what he says about his HBCU's experience within his family, and he's from North Carolina, so his family had a rich tradition of being involved at HBCUs, but he went to Wake Forest. He went to the big white school because if you're trying to get to the NBA, he figured that was a better shot. But the way he gives back and highlights these HBCUs now is just wonderful. I'm proud of him for having that drive and investing his time and his money in that. And more people need to recognize the value of HBCUs. And for those of you out there who think, oh, why are we doing something special for Black people? There's plenty of white students at HBCUs. There's plenty of white athletes on HBCU sports teams, predominantly so on most of the baseball teams and things like that. I believe J.R. Smith has several white golf teammates down there, at A&T. And so, these are Black-centered schools, but they are not segregated. It's part of the Black experience. And my last comment is that a lot of people overlook the fact that in an educational environment for Black children and young adults in elementary school through high school and college, to go to school in an all-white environment where you're one of 5 or 10% at most of the population in terms of Black kids, it's tough. My children go through that. I went through that. So to be in a Black environment with Black professors provides a comfort level that most white people have and just take for granted. So thanks for letting me wax unpoetically about HBCUs, and thanks for paying attention to the coverage over there at the Undefeated.
Well, and it's important for all the reasons that you're talking about, and as you said, it doesn't mean that it's just a Black college. It's the first word is historically. It's not exclusively, and to me, the important thing of, like, they talk about Deion Sanders and the light that he's shining on it by going there. To me, like, people don't seem to understand that football shouldn't be as emphasized as it is, or basketball or any sport, but it brings attention, and bringing attention leads to more money, and more money leads to better educational resources. So it is important to shine a light on the football team and the basketball team and the other sports in addition to the university, because it does provide additional opportunities to the school that may not have been there before. I mean, I went to Michigan and Pitt, and they have plenty of resources. And part of the resources that they have are because of their football programs and their basketball programs, and the fact that you see those names on television every weekend.
Absolutely. Like John Thompson said in his book, when we're winning, enrollment goes up, alumni donations go up. Those HBCUs really need that money. Enrollment equals revenue. So great point, Jeff, as usual.
So we might as well end on a basketball note. As behind your shoulder, for those people that'll be able to see the video, you are the co-author of a book with John Thompson, Came as a Shadow. let's talk a little bit about Ben Simmons. So for Philadelphians, which is where we're based, we're now dealing with the Ben Simmons ordeal. What are your thoughts on the way that Ben Simmons is dealing with this?
Well, first thing is that he's still a young man. And when I was his age, I did a lot of things that were, very questionable. I made a lot of questionable decisions. My mindset and attitude were not where they should have been, but I got to live out my struggles without the world paying attention. So everything I say is really in the spirit of hoping that this young man learns from this and improves. So the deal is, man, it seems really obvious to me. And it comes from the fact that we put athletes on such a pedestal and we give them everything. And so a kid like Ben Simmons has gotten everything and has his every need and desire and wish catered to since a very young age because they knew from when that boy was very young, he might be the number one pick. And so what we're looking at is he has been spoiled and enabled. And for the first time in his life, he's not successful at something. And then how do you deal with that? And he's, I believe, responding in the wrong way with petulance, with entitlement, with sort of throwing a bit of a tantrum. And I understand, yeah, it was pretty harsh what your teammates said about you after that last playoff, you know, uh, performance, if you could call it that. It was pretty tough, man. But hey, it was also true. Sometimes we got to buck up and take that on the chin and use it to get better. And so, you know, I'm not against him wanting to be traded. I think players should be able to play wherever they want. But I do believe that until that point, he needs to change his attitude around. And I think it's just a function of growing up, and it's a emblematic of how people with athletic gifts are taken care of and catered to and enabled up until the point where they fail and then they have a harsh reality coming to them. So I think he'll get better. I think he's got good people advising him. I think Doc Rivers is a good guy. I think Rich Paul is a good guy. I think that they're telling him the right things. He has two parents in his life. But he's a 25-year-old multimillionaire, man, and I was a 25-year-old hundredaire, and you couldn't tell me nothing. So, but he'll get it. He'll get it.
Look, Jesse, we could talk to you all day. We always appreciate the time and the depth we get to go with you on these issues, and look forward to keep following what you're doing on the Undefeated and having you back on next time to take us through this all.
Oh man, Jason, Jeff, what you guys do is so valuable. The issues you raise are what so many more people should be thinking about. Plus, you guys know sports forward and back, but then you get the whole bigger picture to it. So salute you guys. I'm here whenever you guys want to talk. I'm here.
Thank
And we're here whenever you want to talk, including when you come visit and watch your son play some good basketball at Drexel.
Yes, sir. Defending CAA champs, baby. Back to back. What's up?
We will be following. Jesse, thanks so much for the time, man. You take care of yourself.